We heard in the previous presentation about the importance of getting a flow of ideas coming into the company, going through the company, and then coming out of the company in the form of innovative new products. And you can talk about systematization, trying to produce sort of structures and systems that help you innovate. But at the end of the day, it's all about people. At least that's my thesis for this panel, and I'm delighted to have three very illustrious panelists to discuss how you create an innovative workforce. To my immediate left is Laszlo Bock, who leads Google's people function, and that's all areas related to the attraction, development, and retention of Googlers, as they are known. And he leads the various operating groups at Google, including the services group, or he leads or has led the various operating groups at Google, including the services group, the technology and operations group, and a number of other areas. So Laszlo has a long track record of experience at Google. To Laszlo's left, in the middle here, is George Halvorson, who is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Kaiser Permanente, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, headquartered here in Oakland, California. Kaiser is the nation's largest non-profit health plan and hospital system, serving more than 9 million members and generating about $50 billion in annual revenue. And last but not least, on the far end, is Mary Humiston. Mary is the head of HR for Applied Materials, which provides manufacturing solutions for the semiconductor, flat panel display, and solar industries. And under her leadership, she is responsible for the organization, culture, and talent necessary to keep Applied Materials ahead of all of its rivals in its industry. So three really interesting panelists, and we're going to focus on three particular areas. First of all, how one creates an innovative culture by connecting employees with customers, making sure that they understand what customers' needs are so that they can come up with creative ideas, whether that's through immediate face-to-face contact or through data. The second area we're going to look at is the recruitment, development of innovative employees, how you make sure you bring in the best people at when you recruit them, and how you develop them on an ongoing basis. And then finally, another area that Robert touched on is culture, how you develop and nurture a risk-taking culture. So those are the three areas we'll focus on, and we're going to kick off with connecting employees with customers. Now, George, at KP, Kaiser Permanente, you have this amazing database you've developed of medical records. I think it's the biggest in the country, if not the world.
In the world.
And how do you use that to make sure that your employees understand what patients' needs are? And how do you sort of generate innovative ideas out of that?
Well, we use it in a couple of ways. But one of the things we do is we track all care delivery. We understand what's happening with diabetics. We understand what's happening with people who have asthma. We actually we have 29 quality scores in the country where we have the highest score of any healthcare organization in the world. And one of the things we can do for each of those 29 scores is we can break it down by race and ethnicity and geography. So I can tell you what the African-American asthma treatment rate is in Sacramento versus San Diego versus Honolulu by the site. And that actually lets us focus very directly on which areas we're having problems on. And that's an area where across the board, we're usually the #1 scores in the country, but for our African-American population, we're actually in 90th percentile for the country.
Right.
And so that gives us an opportunity to focus. So that's one thing we've done. The other thing, we have 100 million email or electronic contacts with our members through kp.org. So we provide all kinds of direct service relationships. And we track the feedback. We keep track of what they say to us and what they want. And one of the things we discovered a couple of years ago that they wanted heavily was to get computer access to their lab results. And so we set that up. So I had my blood drawn the other morning.
Right.
And by 11 o'clock in the morning, I had my lab results on my iPhone. And by 4 in the afternoon, I had an email from my doctor, and she interpreted the results for me. We had a dialogue, and she changed the prescription. And we did that electronically. So we did that entire connectivity. That came from our members saying, we want that.
Right.
We want that kind of ability to connect.
And so all doctors have access to that system?
All doctors have access to that. Our motto, one of our mottos is make the right thing easy to do.
Make the right thing easy to do.
Yeah,
okay.
and so what we've done is we give all of the doctors access all the time. In fact, we not only have done that, we've taken electronic medical education information. We have every medical journal available to doctors real time, and we also have 2,500 care protocols available to our doctors real time. So I could actually pull up a care protocol for asthma now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Mary, do you have ways in which you make sure your employees are constantly getting feedback from your customers to see whether there are opportunities to innovate and making sure they stay ahead of the innovation curve?
Absolutely, and I think the last speaker, Robert, spoke to this. We believe that it's really imperative and fundamental that we are connecting deeply with our customers, and it starts with an alignment with their technology roadmap. So it's partnering right on the ground. For us, it's technical to technical because the solutions and the equipment are high tech. So it's a very important, beyond sales to purchasing, that it's the most sophisticated technical director speaking to the technical side of the customer with full credibility to be able to guide the roadmap and align with the roadmap and stay very ahead of where the customers are thinking about going. And that information is fed all the way back through the entire product development chain, and so it stays very connected.
Got
but
it.
it
So
starts
they have
there.
access to everything.
Absolutely.
And that's, I guess at Google, everybody's connected to everything, right? There's no question about data. The question is, how do you make sure that the right employees get access to the right data to be able to understand what opportunities are out there that they can bring to Google through their own innovation inside?
Yeah, from users or from within the company?
From within the company. So staff, those are your staff.
Yeah.
When they come up with new ideas, I mean, clearly, how does that work within Google?
Well, I think one of the challenges when you talk about letting employees be creative and innovative is people tend to assume there's a monolithic model where there's one way to do it, and if you follow these 3 steps, you're going to be creative and innovative. I don't know if that's true or not. Our experience is that you actually need a lot of different approaches running at the same time. So we've long had this view in the company that when forced to make a decision, ideally you do both, and then you see what happens. So if you're an individual in the company, there's all kinds of different mechanisms to make your voice heard. And one of the central tenets of our culture actually revolves around voice and letting people be heard. So it ranges from things like online databases where every project that's worked on in the company is listed. So if you're curious about something, you just go and see what people are working on, to a weekly TGIF meeting that the founders, Larry and Sergey, host, where they talk about, here's what we did this week, and then you can talk about anything, raise any issue. There's also sort of more formal ways to get projects going and so on. But we also have something called Google X, which is kind of our skunkworks team. They do some very interesting things like the self-driving cars. And then within each of our teams, there's almost everywhere some pocket where people are doing creative things. So the idea is to give lots of different avenues for people to create.
George, you're nodding. Is there something, does that Kaiser Permanente sort of approach it? Can anyone see anything? I mean, you're dealing with very sensitive patient data. So.
Yes, very sensitive patient data, but we do have a couple inside websites where people share information. We have an idea-based website, and we also have 700 different projects that we have going on right now in innovation. And we celebrate the results of those projects, and then we share them with people. So yeah, the goal is to have everyone innovating all the time, and we celebrate that innovation.
And so the database is open to any employee in the company can come in and have a look at that ideas database.
There are several databases. The oncologists have a separate database that only oncologists can add information to. There are certain parts of that database that are more closed.
Got it.
But there are other parts. How do we use electronic medical record most effectively everywhere? That's an open database. There are hundreds of ideas that people put in. I learned this, I learned that, and that creates an internal synergy and continuous improvement.
Terrific. That's great. Let's move on to our second theme, recruitment and development of innovative employees. Let's kick off with Laszlo here. I mean, you're head of people operations, I believe, and you spend an inordinate amount of time and effort in the recruitment process. Can you talk us through just the key tenets of that process and what you've really found has worked very well for you?
Yeah. So we at Google get anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5 million unique applications every year. And we've been growing the company in the past by about 4,000 people a year to give you a sense of what the pass-through rate is.
So no one wants to work at Google.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
No one's ever heard of us is the problem. If only people had heard of Google.
So how do you weed out the innovative ones?
Well, we don't weed out the innovative ones. We try to screen those in.
Find the innovative ones, I should say.
But there's a couple principles. Number one is we hire for capability and learning ability before we hire for expertise. We actually would rather hire smart, curious people than people who are deep, deep experts in one area or another, because a smart person who's curious and able to learn will 90% of the time come up with a pretty good answer, but somebody who's been doing the same thing forever will typically just replicate what they've seen before. And so you need a mix, but we skew heavily towards people who are kind of open to new ideas and creative. The second thing we do is we don't compromise our hiring bar, ever. It means it takes us longer to fill an open job than it does in some other organizations. But the reason is we sort of have to kiss a lot of frogs before we find a prince or a princess. And as a result, we have a very low rate of sort of people who end up not working out. And the final thing is we make the process as objective as possible. So we, of course, use a lot of data to make sure we're sort of doing things fairly in an unbiased way. But we, for example, don't let hiring managers make a hiring decision. Every person who's hired by Google will get interviewed by a hiring manager, but that is one vote among many, and it gets reviewed by hiring committees, and eventually still gets reviewed by Larry Page, our CEO and founder, before we make an offer.
So Larry reviews every hire?
He still does.
George, do you review every hire at King? No. Why? Why does he have to see every hire? Is that part of the magic here? Or?
It is part of the magic, and what's interesting is it's the message it sends is as important as the actual act itself, right? It says, this is something we care about. If you want a company of creative, innovative people, you want everyone to care about that. You want everyone to invest time in the recruitment and attraction of those people. And the fact that our CEO, to this day, spends time on it, says it's important.
So, Mary, you're bringing very innovative people into applied materials, but how do you then develop them? How do you make sure that people who are very innovative are recognized and get the sort of support that they need?
We think the talent lever is extremely important. It's all part of a whole system to drive the culture, but we do believe in a pipeline of talent that comes from universities across the world. First of all, about 25% of our external hires come as new college graduates, and we have very strategic partnerships with universities to, on joint development, but also in bringing this talent in for fresh ideas, for challenging, existing paradigms. So that keeps things fresh and brings in that strong pipeline. On the development side, we've created what we call an innovation academy. And there are many pieces to that, but one I would highlight is a program we call Innovator in Action. And it brings top technologists from all over the company. So you could come from solar, or display, or the semiconductor side, you may never even have met before, and you may even think, well, what are you going to add to this particular technical challenge? And we give them one of our customers' highest value problems to think about solving. It's only 1 year in existence, but in that one session, they've identified over $3 billion of revenue opportunities. We've filed patents and innovation alerts. And the network that's now built, across the company of people talking to each other that never did before is really powerful.
So
the
it sort of
customers
breaks
have
down
noticed
the silos, does it, within the company? Because you can get very siloed in large companies.
Absolutely.
And so that really helps to break it down.
Sorry, go ahead.
Please.
If I could build on that too,
Laszlo.
speaking of development programs, it's funny because one of the things that we found is that even when you put all the effort into hiring people, it's easy for them to focus on the job, and particularly as you progress, to sort of just get mired in, okay, here's my task, here's what I need to get done. And so we've also tried to invest in how do you keep people engaged and thinking like owners and entrepreneurs. So we developed a program we call the Advanced Leadership Lab, which we've been running for now 5 years. But part of what we design into it is the program sort of breaks down in the middle of it. And the idea is we sort of want to foment revolution among the attendees. Sort of halfway through it, they go, oh, this isn't working for me. This isn't what I wanted. And what we've seen, and we sort of stumbled across this the first time. First time we ran it, people said, we don't like the program. We want a different program. And so we said, well, redesign it. And halfway through, they redesigned it. So we then built that into the course. And as a result, one of the main things people take away from it is whether I'm junior, senior, what have you, my job is not to accept like the structure of the company as a given, but instead to say, okay, if this isn't working, if I'm not able to create and innovate and feel like an owner, I'm responsible for actually changing the environment around me within the company.
That's awesome.
Right. And George, at Kaiser Permanente, how do you go about sort of making sure that people are encouraged to be innovative within?
We are almost obsessive with innovation. We have competition on safety where we have multiple programs compete for the safest site, and we have, and they innovate in developing various ways of improving safety. We have quality programs. We'll typically have a couple dozen nominees for those programs.
That's interesting.
And we then pick the biggest improvement in quality in the last year, but then we communicate to all of our employees the entire dozen or 2 dozen nominees so that everyone's encouraged to do that. And we hold innovation conferences half a dozen times. And we bring people in and we fund. We've got millions of dollars. And we right now have 80 those projects that are being funded
out of the
that came out of the conferences.
That's very interesting. So you sort of have gamification. You have the competition element of it.
We have competition elements,
then the collaboration,
which people love, and we share.
They do. I think it's a really interesting.
And then we also have the Garfield Center, and the Garfield Center is set up. It's a large center just south of town. It's set up. It looks like a film studio. And we model homes, we model clinics, we model hospital beds.
Wow, so I can play Grey's Anatomy
you can
at
come
the same
in, it's
time.
like Grey's Anatomy, you can come in
fabulous.
And we actually have cameras set up in the ceiling.
Yeah, I bet people love
because
that.
we check the interaction, and so we're trying to figure out, we believe that the third site of care is going to be the home. We think in-home care is going to be huge.
Yeah.
And so we're modeling, testing various ways of doing
microclinics.
Connections, and microclinics are also going to be huge.
Right.
To get it out to the, so that we have these massive hub clinics, and then the microclinics as a connectivity model. All connected with electronic medical record.
Sorry to be crude about this, because I'm the economist, I'm going to ask this. What about money? What about cash? Do you sort of incentivize employees to stay innovative by giving big cash prizes for great? I mean, can I get a stake in my Google spin-off or my X project or whatever, or is it just for the greater glory of?
No, actually, there's a lot of academic research that actually says as soon as you introduce extrinsic rewards, intrinsic motivation declines. And so once you start attaching dollars to things, right?
Right.
It creates problems.
So you think it's bad? Mary thinks it's a good idea, don't you?
I don't know.
But we did the same thing. We deproductized all of those ideas. When we were productizing them a few years ago, people would want a patent, and then they would want 30%
and they
of
want
the patent,
their ownership.
and then we froze innovation.
Did you? You froze innovation?
It stopped.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we had deliberated.
What about Clyde?
Well, George said people do love competition, and they love to. I think there's no substitute for getting the best minds together on a problem, especially a high value problem of a customer, and then getting barriers out of their way and letting them. You're right, go at it. That's the intrinsic motivation, but you do need to have. I think you're also motivated by the fact that you could receive corporate funding to see it go somewhere after that,
right?
And that, and if in addition you personally get some stock or some cash from that, that's been working for us. It's not huge amounts. It's not so much that you're right. It confuses it, but we have mini environments going on all the time.
So what's a mini environment?
So it's leveraging crowdsourcing.
I see.
Bringing teams together on problems. They are competing for whose ideas will then get discretionary corporate funding and be able to take those ideas forward.
Got it. I mean, we sort of strayed into our area of culture and actually addressed it in quite some depth with some of those issues, the last area I wanted to cover. But George, tell me a little bit, as you're a CEO, I mean, people say leadership comes from the top, the culture's set at the top. How have you gone about making sure that people understand Kaiser needs to be innovative and that the employees all feel empowered?
One of the things I do is I write a letter every Friday to every single one of our employees. And the letter on Friday usually celebrates either quality or innovation or patient focus. And I encourage innovation by taking innovative things that have happened, talking about why they're important, and then sharing them with everybody. And that creates sort of an atmosphere and a culture internally.
Right.
That this is who we are. And our motto is we want to be the best at getting better.
So we want to be the best at getting better.
We want to be the best at getting better.
I wish I thought that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And Laszlo, I guess from Google's perspective, this Friday meeting where the CEO and other senior people turn up, that's very important in signaling how innovation matters to the company.
Oh yeah, I mean,
presume you celebrate people there?
Yeah, well, the best part, I mean, you celebrate the new people who joined, people who've hit milestones, but you spend a lot of time on what are the coolest things that have happened. And what's interesting is sometimes it's things we did inside the company, and sometimes it's things that, to your earliest question, that our users have done to sort of discover what's happening in the world. So the Google Endangered Languages project came from users wanting to save languages that were disappearing.
Oh, interesting. That was, okay,
Yeah.
Terrific. Right. I want to make sure we have some good time for Q&A. Ladies and gentlemen, should we bring our equipment out? We discovered in our previous panel, these lights are incredibly bright, so we can't really see you. So we want to be the coolest panel. Therefore, this is innovation, and George is writing about protecting your eyes in his next letter. So Q&A, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I can see you. So we have one over here in the middle. Be careful. Do not fall down when you cross there, because George can't help you right away. So there's this gentleman here at the front, and then how many microphones? Do we have another one? You got that one. Okay, it's coming down. Can you introduce yourselves, please, when you ask, just before you ask your question?
Yeah. Peter Slusarczyk, Marsing. I have a question for you about how you manage the people in innovation through their career. If you want to hold on to them for several years and so on, how you manage their career? Obviously, some of them can go to the managerial positions, but not all innovative people are the best managers.
Got it. So, Mary, do you want to take that first?
It's a fabulous question. I think, and many companies do this, but I think you have to have career paths that work for people who want to pursue technical management type careers, as well as pursue more deeply technical careers. At Applied, we do have a very strong technical career path, and we have an equivalent role that we call a principal member of technical staff that's equivalent to a VP. And from there, you can actually become a fellow. We have 10 fellows in the company. They're for lifetime. It's a distinction for lifetime sustainable contribution in the technical field. And there is some monetary reward to that.
Good.
But there's also a lot of recognition. They become also mentors and sponsors of a lot of the activity going on. Their pictures exist where we have our board meetings and where we have our learning center. It is a big honor. But I think it is really important that there is a clear path and people feel they can pursue either.
Do either of you want to add to that?
Yeah, a couple things. Just briefly, number one, make sure they're surrounded by other people who want to do the same thing. The biggest thing that keeps people at Google is the quality of the other people they perceive to be around them. The second thing is have a mission, like connected to something that actually matters, not just making a buck. What we find is that people stick around even when there's a lull because they feel like we're doing something that actually makes the world better rather than just trying to optimize earnings per share. And the third thing in our case is size actually helps. We've got a platform where if you make a change to how Google Search works or Google Keep or what have you, you're affecting billions of people right away. Right. So even relatively small innovations give you a lot of platform. And if you've done everything you can in one area, there's lots of other areas to experiment in as well.
Terrific, thank you. Question from down here. If you could say your name first of all.
This is Chung Lee from BCG. Just wanted to ask a question about how do you actually measure the effectiveness of your innovation programs in terms of what do you actually measure? And then things like rate of failure, to even look at that, and how do you actually deal with those things?
George, do you want to?
Well, we measure effectiveness whether or not our innovation is all functional. So we have better throughput on care, we have better safety rates in the delivery room. We have many, many data elements, and we measure the effectiveness by whether or not we've improved those data elements. So are we seeing more patients? Are we seeing more patients? Are we saving more lives? We cut the sepsis death rate by 2/3 and transplanted that into all of our hospitals. We measure the effectiveness by the fact that we have succeeded in achieving the goal that we innovated about. So it's all very data-based. It's not a sense of just generic doing better. It's a sense of have we actually moved the needle in our performance.
Thanks, George. Mary?
Customer VOC every year on specific questions in that regard, product success rates, time to productivity. But we also want to set the tone that learning is definitely key as well. And failing fast, failing early is good and it's okay, and it's as valuable as some of the other metrics.
Interesting.
So just very quickly, it's fiendishly difficult, as you might guess, to actually separate all the independent variables from the dependent variable of whatever innovation. And how do you differentiate that between just the ongoing improvements you have in an organization and business, right? So we look at a handful of things. Number one is we actually do pilots. So when we do interventions like training, coaching, things like that, we will have a control and a non-control group, and we'll run the experiment and see if the output of those teams differentiate themselves in a way that's relatable back to the intervention that you've done. Number two, every year we survey everyone in the company, and basically we ask about a whole range of dimensions, but one of the big output variables we look at is, does the company feel innovative or not? And so it's not exactly quantitative because it's the perception, but we focus on that strongly because it's a bit of a self-fulfilling virtuous cycle, right? If people think you're creative, they're going to bring more creativity to it. And the last thing is we look at qualitative things like, is there just cool new stuff going on all the time that our hardcore engineers will describe as epic, right? And if we're sort of hitting that bar, both inside the company and our user base, we feel like we're generally in the right direction.
I love that, the EPIC test. We have a question down here, and then over. I think there's one over here.
Shall I
go ahead?
Excellent. David Firth, University of Montana, Business School. An innovative workforce requires innovative graduates. So what the heck should I be teaching my students?
Mary?
Okay, so I really think one thing that's so important is that there is a strong level of business acumen as a foundation, because we tend to find a little bit of technology push comes into play, which is often terrific, but it does still have to align to a customer need and the understanding of holistically business, but also how do you commercialize the technology, and how do you take an early stage idea at a very early horizon all the way through to profitability and to the market. It seems to sometimes, so the strategic marketing mindset as well as the technical mindset is really critical.
I would say, first, Chris Argyris at Harvard, I don't know if he's still there, but he wrote an article 20 years ago about teaching smart people to learn. What he found was he looked at HBS grads, and 10 years out, they plateau in their careers. And he reasoned that it was because smart people rarely experience failure, and as a result, their ability to learn shuts down. So encourage them to experience failure, right? Because that will cause them to be open to future learning rather than tripping into the fundamental attribution error, which is a success is due to my brilliance and a failure is due to everybody else around me. Very specifically, though, teach them in a business school, statistics and operations are probably the two areas which are going to be most leverageable and most applicable and most valuable in the careers of most people coming out of business schools, because those give you a tool set that actually lets you measure what's happening and what is reality, and you can build a lot of innovation around that.
George?
I would agree with the operations and the statistics. And also teach people to look outside, to learn their discipline, really know their discipline, but then look outside their discipline at what other professions and industries are doing, because the cross-industry pollination can sometimes be glorious. And if you aren't looking out and you're only looking in, you don't see it. And so teach them to look outside of their
It's a great
column.
point. And if I may add, I think you should teach them to subscribe to The Economist, please, as well. That's excellent. Okay, I'm going to take one last question. I want one from upstairs, because I've been very neglectful of upstairs, and there is a gentleman, no doubt, on the left-hand side who has the microphone. Oh. Go ahead.
Hi, is this thing on?
Yeah, you are. You're live.
Hi, I want to ask about the what I call the politics of innovation. For example, we always talk about innovation as an unalloyed good, but if I'm doing an innovation, then what about all the other people in, for example, a big company that are being innovated on, right? Or the people whose my innovation will change their work or their processes. Because we see in big companies, why do big companies sometimes resist innovation? Right. Sometimes it's the other people. Talk about that.
So the blocks to innovation.
Yeah, there's a natural barrier to any change. People don't like to, people who are doing any particular thing and doing it well like to continue doing that. So you have to add to that a culture of getting continuously better, continuous improvement, and being the best at getting better to be part of who you are, then causes all the people who are doing what they're doing to not accept that as the permanent status quo, but to accept that as what's happening now, and it's a step into something. If you don't do that, the barriers to change can be almost insurmountable. If people don't have an expectation that continuous improvement is good, they create barriers that can really cripple change.
Briefly. Mary, Laszlo, briefly.
I would just say organizations exist to allow people to do things that singly they couldn't do, right? I mean, that's the whole theory of the organization. If you're in an organization where you're not able to innovate, first appeal to values, right? I mean, there's lots of influencing techniques, but basically, like, are you there to do the right thing and to do good things for your customers, users, the world, what have you, or not? And if there's no agreement, then it might not be the right organization.
I just think, you know, we said it earlier, it's the tone from the top is so incredibly important. And if you really listen and look at what are the things the messages in the company are stressing, what are the words that are used, and you know, is innovation really a core value? And if so, how is it showing up? And what are those messages? And it starts there, but also to your point is the focus on continuous improvement, learning, are the role models showing that? Are the systems aligned to support that? Is that being really encouraged, or are there blockers in the way and we're not facing that, we're not removing the obstacles?
Terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, very briefly, again, imagine I am the web. I'm going to do some hyperlinks. I would really encourage you to read George's book of letters. It's fascinating insights into the way medical science has been advancing in America and the world, and beyond, indeed, and some of the innovative stuff that Kaiser Permanente has done. Both Mary and Laszlo have some very interesting speeches and other things. I mean, Laszlo is an entrepreneur of many different sort of colors as well in his own right. Go look at them on the web. Look at all their stuff. It's really fascinating, and it will give you a great insight into how they've been innovative in their own careers. Please thank me. Please thank my panelists. You can thank me later.
Thank you.